Okay, so today we're gonna see the first part, maybe the only part, depending on how quickly we go through all this, of the front-end development of Chamilo 2. And for this, we're gonna focus on Vue because we use Vue.js for most of the visual part of the new tools. I mean, when I say new tools, I mean the the converted tools. What we want to do if we develop new tools is have them in Vue, and obviously we are converting legacy tools to tools written in Vue with a backend of API platform that we talked about in the last episode. And so for this, we're gonna go through the assets directory, which is the most important one regarding the front end of Chamilo 2. And I'm gonna let Julio do the talking.
Yeah, so all the view part in Chamilo, it's located in this folder in assets in view. Um, Here is the whole structure we have. And the most important files in view are main.js, where we create the view object. We create our services and add different components that we are going to use. And finally, at the end, we just create the view app, and we mount it in the div that we saw before. This important uh, div that must be present in the HTML file in order to the page to load in view.
Mhm.
Um, Here we have different folders. So, for example, if we want to show something in Chamilo, first we have to think in terms of the entity, what we are going to show, what information. In Chamilo, we create the documents using Vue. For example, in the course,
The
documents,
documents tool.
and
Okay.
and this this content is loading using Vue. So uh, so we have to think in terms of the entity. It's going to be the document entity. So if I'm going to show a new entity, I don't know, it could be the calendar, for example. So I have to create some some things in order to show this page. One of the things is the router. So in the router we have different files, for example, course, if I want to show the list of courses. Then here in the course, I defined the path, and then I show uh, it's like at the controller, no? Where when the user is visiting a URL, where I going to, in which page is going to be load. For example, this is the main path, courses, and this is the children of this main path. So the default page, courses, is going to be connected with this page, list view. The new, if I want to create a new course, it's going to be views, course, create. Um, and like that, edit and show. So here is the main structure. We start with the router and we put all the information so we have an idea what is going to be this entity,
And I can put
courses entity.
whatever I want in that path, or do I have to
You
use
can put
specific terms?
whatever you want,
Okay.
new to anything you want. You have to just
And in the
make this.
okay, and in the format that just after new the dot column ID slash edit, that ID will be a number, right? That's why we have
Uh-huh.
column ID. Okay.
Yes, this will be load later. in another process.
Okay.
And so we start like this. We create our router, and there are different ways of getting the courses to get the information from the API platform. So, for example, well, I've created my courses page, and then we start because there is already a structure here, courses layout. We just copy and create. If I'm creating another entity,
Mm-hmm.
I just copy the same and I change course instead for, I don't know, announcement or anything.
Okay.
Later, if I go to the view part, the view course, and I have already list, show, update, so I just copy and paste and create the pages. Uh, if I want to show information, um, so here, how to explain? We are using mixins, which is a view way of structuring the data. It's like including code from another file inside this file.
Okay.
I'm saying I'm going to use the list mixing functionality in this page, so we can reuse it in different parts of the code, not only here.
Okay.
So, for example, here there is data filter. No, there is a data table, which is a special table with pagination and a lot of different mm, functionality. No, so the most important part, for example, is in this is the items. Those are the items that are going to be shown. So items, somehow it has to be filled with data. So how we get this data in this example, because it's a mixing, we are using mixins. We go here, list mixing, and this is the code that is going to get the information from the backend. Um,
That file list mixing is a generic code for any type of list or for a type of list of courses or so
so this all everything we ask from, for example, I'm going to network. I enter here, and this is going to get me some information. Copy link address up. I put documents job.json, and this is going to give me some data. And well, I want more metadata. If I go here, yes, this is not JSON, this is JSON LD, I think. So I have more metadata, so I can see that there is either a member, either a search, either a total times. If I do the same with courses, it's going to give me something similar. API context courses, API courses, collections, but the IDRA member is going to be different because there's some similarities. I mean, ID is going to be API courses 3, type courses. So there is some metadata that it's generic for all the
okay.
entities. So that's
So that list
that's why
mixing
the list mixing,
can be used for everything. It can be used for everything
yes.
that is similar,
But
whether has the similar structure. It will not show everything, but
yes,
it will show a common set of attributes.
yes. So mm, yeah, where? So list mixing. So because I'm using list mixing, it's going to, by default, it's going to get me all that the information from the courses. But if I want some filterings, I can add, for example, it items per page, or I can pass some filters if I only courses type 1
Mm-hmm.
or some specific filters.
Where do you send those
So that's
filters?
one way.
In the data
Here,
table definition.
yes. I mean, in Beautify, you can, for example, this Beautify is free, but in Beautify 2, they have the data table. Data table, and sometimes you can make some searches, and this will be is going to ask to the backend. It's going to give an option to the backend, and it's going to
Okay.
be added in the query. For example, like here is going to add a new option, type 1, or
Okay.
I don't know, enable
Yeah. Yeah.
1,
Yeah. Okay.
something like that. But of course, you can create your own extension, like say document extension. And here you can make your own filters, like I explained before.
Yeah.
Uh, if I want to modify the query or just disable, uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's going to, when I enter here, it's going to show appear an error and all that.
Okay.
So this is one way of using the mixins, but sometimes we, for example, if for the calendar, we are doing with the calendar. So I have components, declare event, I have the layout, but the views is what I want. Views, calendar event, list. And here is the same. I have my view file, and I'm using the full calendar component, and this full calendar needs these options. So I create the options here, and there must be a way to full calendar to get the information, and it's events, and events is going to call the get calendar events. Get calendar get calendar events is just a function that receives two dates, start and end, because full calendar will requires first date
Mm-hmm.
and the last date here. So in this function, I think it was written by Angel at the beginning, but we can also use the list, the mixins, but it's kind of more easy just to get the calling the API directly, and we just pass the parameters here. And these calendar events, I'm going to get the Adrian member, which is the list of events. Later in full calendar, we have to say, okay, from what you receive, this is the start and this is the end. And it's going to understand, it's going to show the information respecting what full calendar wants.
Okay.
So one second way of getting data is just using Axios, which is a library to make requests. Axios get, I put the entry point, which is a shortcut for the API URL.
Mm-hmm.
Say calendar events, because this is also an entity. And why this? Because in the entity it's say calendar event, and it's an S on plus. Uh, which you can define also. I think you can define a name, and you can put something calendar if you want. I
Okay.
don't remember title, URL. There was something, but by default, And in order to be more clear, to say, okay, this is really the entity.
Yeah.
It's just by default. So this is one way to get information, just doing a query and getting the data, and then full calendar will take care of that information. So, and we have one more way of getting the information is with GraphQL, which is in course home, I think. Lists. It's not course home. No, it was in the courses list. In courses list is this, my courses, and this, my courses. So here, this is my course list, and I have my view file, and here I'm using Apollo, which is a library that help us using GraphQL inside Vue.
Okay.
And here I use Jquery, and I created this file, get course rel user. So also it's always connected with an entity. It's more clear. Get course rel user. Okay, I understand course rel user. It's an entity, and here I get what I want from the courses. I pass the user like a parameter, API users plus the user ID, and I make the GraphQL query.
Okay,
Here.
so here for the
So
GraphQL query, just to mention, you are in the assets view GraphQL queries folder, and you're opening
yes,
course user.js, and there are only three files there, which has it's just
one
that.
per entity.
Yeah.
You can create more queries in one file, so it just
Okay.
to be more order course. In this case, for sticky courses, for example, I created a GraphQL and I say that sticky it should be true.
Is there a
And what
specific
is doing?
reason to use GraphQL instead of querying the data in another way, or is it just that I don't know? For this, it was more. It was nicer in the GraphQL syntax to do the queries, or I don't know.
It's better because here I use GraphQL because I have to get information from the course and I have to get information from the category and make different. Not I don't only want one thing.
Yeah.
When I go to my courses, I'm not just showing the course title. If it's only the course title, I will probably use just rest
Yeah.
and get the course list. But in Chamilo, it's very complicated, especially when using sessions, because you have to show the category session, the session itself, the coach of the session,
The
and
courses
the
it's
list of the
composed of.
course,
Yeah.
who is like 20 things. So how should I how could I do that
Yeah.
in
It's easier to
REST?
do in GraphQL for this kind of composed queries.
In REST, I have to make different queries all the time, or create it in my own controller and do it in the backend.
Yeah.
So I return an array, a clean array, and then Vue just use it. But instead of that, all that information is already in the database. So
Okay.
GraphQL help us filtering this content. It's just like a query, it's only that you add more
Yeah. Yeah.
information like the course, the title, and the users,
Okay.
and all that. So that's why in complex cases like course rel user, session rel users, it was more fast to do this.
And,
Just create this. Otherwise, I have to create a controller and I have to do the queries myself in the backend.
yeah, and we agree that GraphQL you get it for free, let's say, using API platform, right? So you don't have to. It is already defined in the API platform definition in the entities.
Yes, you
Okay.
have to. you have to. This is the session role user entity. So if I go here, it's an API platform, API resource.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
yeah, you have to implement it like that.
Yeah.
So that's the other way to get information. The first one is just the list, the mixings. In documents is the mixings, for example, documents, view, documents, list. This is data table, and expecting items, and items, that variable, it's filled by the list mixing. I go list mixing. It's done some stuff in order to uh, fill those items.
Okay.
So we can use mixing, we can use directly uh, query, asking directly, and the other way is using GraphQL.
Okay.
Yeah, so I don't know what else.
Yeah, I'd like to
This
stay on
page.
that course list view. So if you could just return to the first line of that course list. Yeah. So basically, so any kind of .view file that you would put in one of those. So here you're in the assets slash view slash views. It's difficult to explain verbally, but you can see it on screen. So view is the name of the library view, and then views is the folder where we will put the .view files, and those .view files usually work like we see here in the course slash list.view, which is start with a template tag, right? And then inside the template tag put a structure that is a mix of HTML and view syntax, view specific syntax, like for example that the one where you have your cursor at the moment, the v else comes with a v if that is a little bit above, and then it means that it will only react under certain circumstances. So it's kind of a statement in PHP. It's just say, okay, there are rules. If you have something, in this case, v if courses dot length means that only if you have something in your courses array, then you will show the course card list. And that course card list contains several courses, etc. But if you don't have a course dot length, or if the course dot length is equal to 0, meaning that the array is empty, then you would show a simple div showing a message that means that shows that there are no courses at the moment. Okay, and then you finish the template tag, which means that you finished the structure of the page itself, and then you define the script tag, which imports all the elements that you might need below, and then you define that export default. And that export default is it's always export default is you can have several export of several things there. Without entering too much into the details, what is your way of doing that so far in Chamilo? Always one export default and that's it, or did you have
Yes,
cases where
by
you have
default, no.
additional needs? Okay.
No, I think only when the queries in GraphQL here, this is a JavaScript file, and I export constants like this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm exporting two, but just here, it's only one.
Yeah. And this is the definition of the
name.
view object, and then you have the different properties of the view object: name, component, setup, etc. Right? Or am I getting that wrong? So
You mean this?
yeah, this.
You have to put it like that.
Yeah.
No,
Okay. So
You
that's
put export
standard.
default, name, course list, and you define your setup is where everything is going to start, and you start creating your view component, your
Yeah.
view.
Okay. Um, okay, and so yeah, now let's move to the more details about the components. So we are in our case. There's a, and I'm gonna explain that so you don't have to. But the basically in Chamilo 2 at the moment, if we could, we would use Vuetify for everything. But we are using. Help me with the versions there. We are using Vue version
Three.
3, which should work with Vuetify version 3 as well, right? But
Yes.
Vuetify version 3, which is what we are using, does not yet at this date, so we're recording this in October of 2021, does not cover all the components that it had in version 2.5. And so
Mm-hmm.
what we're doing, so the components, the Vuetify components, usually you recognize them with the V dash. That's the way to recognize them, or
Yes.
okay. And then
Or
because all components are not yet in Vuetify, we use two additional libraries to complement with additional components. So and those two libraries, those two additional libraries are Quasar and PrimeView. All right. And so the way to recognize a Quasar component is to use a Q dash instead of a V dash. And then PrimeView, I'm not sure what the prefix is there, or if we have a prefix. So do you?
no, they have something more generic. Where it is. Uh, like this. They are using just dialog, input text, button, column, something generic.
Those ones, those 5 lines are the only components that we use in from PrimeView,
In
or
yes, well, all
okay,
this. Yeah,
okay.
prime.
So whenever we want to use a data table component, we just put a tag that's called data table with a D uppercase and an uppercase T, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So these and you had I think you had the documentation pages open there for that. So in the documentation of the respective documentation of PrimeView, Quasar and Vuetify, basically you will look for a component and you will find it and find all the documentation linked to that component. So it's only a matter of following that documentation. We just wanted to make that clear in this video that we are using those components, because otherwise it's kind of a bit weird that we have some parts that have a Q prefix and others that don't, and yeah, it's but yeah, this is because it's a temporary setup, and what we want to do in the future is have that ability to use Vuetify for everything. For now, yeah, it's not really that important or that critical or painful to use all these other libraries. It's just that it's a reality of our time. We have to use those libraries in the meantime. Okay, so given the fact that we actually saw that relatively quickly, what I suggest is we move a little bit to the two last topics, and so we do everything in one episode. So the next topic is Tailwind. So we use Tailwind. So Vue is one layer, Vuetify, Quasar, and PrimeView add components to Vue basically, but that's pretty much it. And then obviously you can have a specific structure in HTML, but you might want to style your components, your visual components, in a specific way. And Tailwind is SCSS engine basically, and allows you to reconfigure the appearance of your website based on keywords that represent style features, right? So basically, in Chamilo, for example, what we will do is we'll have a file called tailwind.config.js at the root of the Chamilo repository, and yeah, we will open it to and that file defines a few things, but mostly you can see that those components in the theme part. So we're on line 5 there. We will extend the basic theme of that comes with Tailwind by adding some particular keywords. So in this case, when we extend it, we say, okay, we want for this implementation of Chamilo, we want the fonts, the main fonts, to be Helvetica Neue, Helvetica, Arial, and Sans Serif. And in that order, so in web, your browser will load in any one of them that is available in the order that they are listed. And then we have the colors. And the colors are really important because they define the general interface of your system if you have used those colors wisely. So for example, in this case, we define a primary, a secondary, and a ternary color. Usually we use them either for backgrounds or for text, but what we're saying here is that the primary color is green and the secondary color is purple. This is just an example, right? It's not gonna be like that in the final Chamilo 2 version, but that's where you would redefine those colors. And here we define a primary color that is the default color, so the main color, and then a dark version and a light version of these colors. And the dark and light versions are basically small variations that will allow you to do buttons with borders that are a little bit darker, or some text on the background that needs to be a bit darker or something like that. So we can do that with the first 3 colors. And once we've defined that here, what we're going to do is reuse those colors in our app.scss, which is on the other side of the directories of Chamilo in the assets folder. In the CSS folder, or in the main CSS folder, you can already find the app.scss. So if we open that one, we will find that we're loading the 3 most used Tailwind elements, and then we're defining a few basic stuff which don't really matter much in our case. And then a little bit lower in the file, we will find a section where we start defining some specific classes, CSS classes, that will reuse those colors that we have defined. So here, from line 30 to line 38, for example, we define some basic rules about the buttons. Okay, so we want those buttons to have a text that is bold. We want the buttons to have a Y padding of two elements of sizes. It's not directly pixels, but it's a rem. And then we want them to be rounded, right? So every button in Chamilo that uses the class btn will have those styles applied. And then this is basic CSS, right? Until now. And then if we look at these rules, the line 31 says apply. So it's a special term that will make it understand that we have something that we want to interpret from Tailwind language. We have that font bold property, which is defined in Tailwind as a bold font, but already that font bold contains all the code necessary so that bold text is something that is understood by all browsers. And then P is for padding, Y is for the Y-axis. It says that we need some space inside the button between the border of the button and the text in the Y-axis, and the PX is for the X-axis. And then rounded means that we want it rounded. we have several variations of rounded that we can use, but in this case we use the default one that is defined in Tailwind. And then if we move to line 34, we see BG blue 500. So BG blue 500 means background blue, and 500 is you have a table of colors that is defined by default by Tailwind. You can reuse those ones. Yeah, maybe you can find it quickly in the documentation. I know it's defined in two different places, but it's not not always immediate to find the table itself. But it's available in the. Yeah, I don't know if that's gonna. No. Yeah, never mind. It's over there. There's a table that defines all the colors available, and then if we yeah exactly, there we go. So if we select BG blue 500, what we're gonna do is basically say that we want that color that says 500 there as a background for the button. So by default we will use if we return to Chamilo for buttons that have the class button blue, we will use that BG blue 500 background and a text that is white on top of that button. Okay, and then the next rule says BG blue 700, meaning that when we hover that button with the mouse, it will, or with the finger, it will turn to a little darker blue. So these are basic rules that they're like shortcuts in CSS. And then if we go down again, a bit, so in this case we have on line 61, for example, the button primary. So this is like a button where we add the class button primary, and there we can see that ch prefix that we use in tailwind.config.js. Why do we use ch for Chamilo? Okay, so it's just the specific Chamilo rules that we named ch. So in this case, it means that the primary buttons, if we take those rules in order, it will have a text that has the primary color as a text, and then a background of the primary color as well. And then which kind of is confusing in this case, because it suggests that we are using the same color for the background and the text, but the ch text primary is different from the ch primary. We're gonna see that back in tailwind.config.js. And then hover column bg ch primary dark means that when we are hovering that button, we will use the ch primary dark color as a background. And then focus means that when we focus on that element, so either with the tab button or by pressing the button of the mouse down, we have a ring. So a ring in Tailwind is a special property that will display a ring around the button when we are focusing on that button. So this is the way that we can use those properties. It's very, very nice. It's a very, very ordered and nice way to use CSS properties. If we come back to tailwind.config.js, Julio, in there, if we go a little bit further down, you can see that ch text element, a little bit in line 30. That ch text, you remember that we use the property called text ch text primary here. So the primary text will be white, and this is important because we have a primary color for background, but then we need the primary text color if we want to write over that background color that is readable. So it has to be contrasted enough, and we have to be able to read that text easily enough. Right, so this is Tailwind. There are processes that are defined in the readme.md, I think, to reload that Tailwind configuration. So actually, I'm not sure it's defined in there. Well, you have yarn, run, and core def. Yeah, obviously that works. So this if you're developing in Chamilo and you're redoing the styles, you will need to run that command to refresh to recompile the app.css based on the app.scss, which itself will include elements from tailwind.config.js, etc. Right. So this is the parenthesis about Tailwind. I don't know if you want to add something, Julio, about Tailwind. Did I miss something important?
I told you so.
Yeah. Right. Fair enough. And then I wanted to discuss with you, Julio, what happens with jQuery and Bootstrap. So we used heavily jQuery and Bootstrap in Chamilo 1, and so in Chamilo 2, I suppose we still depend on them for some sections of the legacy tools. And so my question is, first, where are the corresponding files located in version 2? And so jQuery and Bootstrap. So jQuery obviously is loaded here as a JavaScript dependency, so it will be located in public build? No, in node modules. Sorry, yes. In node modules. And then Bootstrap, do we still use
Bootstrap is not used. It's not installed even here. I think just Christian added in public.
Yeah. So temporarily we are still using Bootstrap.
Yeah.
Why? Because we have documents that have been created in Chamilo 1 by our users that have that Bootstrap library included as an element of to improve the design of their documents. So we're still using that file. It's not the intention to maintain that file there. With Tailwind, we should have enough tools to replace whatever we want from Bootstrap, but it's still there just for maintenance purposes, and it's probably gonna stay there for a while because of the documents that depend on that. But as you can see, it's the Bootstrap minimized version. We only keep this one there, and it's only loaded by those documents that were created in version 1. So it's not that they're used anymore by any Chamilo code. Maybe it is, but it shouldn't. But in case, the file is over there. And then jQuery, yeah, exactly. As you're running through. So what's the idea with jQuery? We are still using it in a lot of places, I guess. But what you're showing there is that we should call it in a different way in Chamilo 2,
or just is the way to make it available in legacy code.
So I could continue using the dollar parentheses.
It's still working. Yes.
It's working. Okay. And so what we discussed.
To use it.
Exactly. So I think what we discussed recently is that we should simply stick to basic JavaScript and use Vue whenever we want to use complex JavaScript, right? Okay. Well, I think that is all, and that is all we wanted to cover for the whole Chamilo 2 development course. So thank you very much, Julio. We're probably gonna do at some point a report on this course with extended information in writing, and we'll add there any kind of information that we believe is important. Remember that you will be able to find, at the moment it's still not there, that's why we recorded this video course, but you will find development information of Chamilo also in the Chamilo documentation, which is at docs.chamilo.org, and otherwise at the moment most of the development information is available on our wiki at github.com/chamilo/chamilo-lms in the master branch, which is bound to become Chamilo 2.0. And Google has it very well indexed apparently. Alright, so here you find the README at the bottom of the page. There is a wiki that contains a section about Chamilo 2. We will update this README file. Can you come back at the beginning of that README file? Did I see view 2.0 in those dependencies? Oh no. Okay, this was yarn. Okay. Yeah, we will update that documentation as soon as we have some time because we need to run with that development. But hopefully this has been useful to you, and we'll see you around. Thank you, Julio.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.